Another thing that comes up for people besides the paperwork are some of the restrictions. So obviously if you become certified organic, it takes some inputs that you may have used in the past or that your neighbor may use, takes those inputs off the table and they're not options. And you have to use inputs that are allowed under the organic program, and you have to, it does mandate that you manage your farm in certain ways, and we'll talk about the pasture rule a little bit. But I'm curious if you guys could speak to that, either just, you know, if you find that one hand is tied behind your back by being certified organic because you can't use, you know, Miracle Grow or something like that.
Well, you know, for livestock, the big issue, of course, is, you know, sort of feed and medications. And I sort of cringed when you said you didn't certify your hay, because, you know, our best hay comes from these vegetable growers. You know, you place some half alfalfa in your rotation, and you get, you know, so
you want to? We make a deal right now. I'll get it certified. You can give me a premium.
So, you know,
you can buy it all.
Sometimes finding, you know, it's frustrating. We live in Franklin County. There's all these hay fields around. Most people do have sort of certifiable hay, but finding someone who actually certifies it can be a little bit challenging. And we have a great relationship with someone now that seems to be producing enough hay, and so I'm feeling pretty secure about that. We're producing some of our own now as well. So for the time being, we're in a secure hay situation. But that sometimes is a cumbersome issue. And then, you know, medications is always something that people ask about, and certainly, you know, we've had our losses. It's heartbreaking to, you know, put a lot of time and energy and a lot of milk and money into a young animal that suddenly needs penicillin at some point in its life, and you have to sell her, and, you know, that happens. And I find it actually a beneficial thing for my farm, because you only want it to happen once. You know, you really don't want to rely on medicines, because you're losing, you know, an incredible amount of money when you have to sell an animal for $150 that you've put $500 into. So I find it good, because it really, you know, it's been years since I've had to treat an animal, but boy, things change very quickly when someone gets sick, and you suddenly look at everyone very, very carefully, and how you can change your system so that things are, you know, that they maintain their health. Or parasites is also a big issue with goats. And again, earlier on, we had more issues where we'd have to, at least with the, you know, with ivermectin, you can dry an animal off. You wait, you know, 90 days, and she can be milking again. You don't have to sell her from the herd. Still, that's a big financial loss. And early on, we definitely had some cases where we'd have problems with that. And I think it's forced us to. It hasn't even forced us, just by the nature of it. Our selection has been, geez, these animals are never dewormed, and they're still making a lot of milk. Well, obviously we keep kids from them, and our herd is really so much stronger and better for it as a result of that. And so, yeah, absolutely there are limitations, and I think they always strengthen the farm in the long run. You just have to sort of get through them. So, any other?
Well, I mentioned the pasture rule. So some of our dairy folks find it easy to meet the pasture rule, and that's that ruminants are required to get 30% of their dry matter intake from pasture. So they have to go outside and they have to eat grass or browse. Yeah. And some folks that's been challenging, either because they're restricted by the amount of land they have access to, the quality of land that they have access to, or if they're a transitional person, maybe it's just out of sync with the way their dad and their grandfather or their previous generations had managed animals. So how have you found?
So I think the pasture rule is great, just because it really does sort of hold the standard of organic. You know, you should have enough land to feed your animals, and I know it can be very difficult to have affordable land or whatever. But I think it. I find it very easy to do the pasture rule. We're very fortunate to have a lot of land base and browse and grass, and we're cutting hay, and so we have a lot of sort of parasite-free land that we have access to. And I've always tried to keep my pasture intake over 50%, in the summer. So the pasture rules have been very easy for me to adjust to, and I'm very grateful for it, because I think it was really compromising the integrity of organic dairy when organics really started to take off, and you hear about these sort of feedlot situations where people are outside, animals are outside, and they're just, the feed's just coming in to them, and I think people really questioned what the value of organic dairy was. So, it's an important rule, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, and another one that I think of with livestock, while we're on the subject, is the outdoor access requirements. And so that is a big difference between a lot of conventional dairies. It saves you a lot of money and time and labor if all of your animals essentially stay inside in one place and you bring them the food and they kind of hang out and they're not burning calories on other things aside from standing there making milk. But the organic requirements are that you have to allow your animals access to the outdoors at all times for practical purposes, and you can withhold outdoor access for under certain conditions if the health of the animal is in danger or if there's severe predator problem or something.
That's been fine. Logistically, it's always a little bit tricky because you're trying to keep groups separate, and fencing is always trickier with goats. You don't just need a strand of polywire, and you have to fence it. Snow. We can messes with fencing regularly, or they're jumping over because of. So for us, the challenge has been you have a couple of different groups, and you're trying to keep them separate, and you're trying to get them outside access. So they certainly enjoy it. It's certainly, I think, a beneficial thing. For me, I'm a little bit finicky about like the water quality issues, and that's the one stumbling block for me too. Is like when the spring comes and you have all this manure that's thawing out of the snowpack. So it's definitely great for the animals to be outside in the sun. There's no question about it. And my goats are pretty good about they just choose to not take their outside access when there's any sort of bad weather. And so that issue isn't as bad. And they are goats.
How about the kids? Do you certify? How many of them do you certify?
Well, they're certified when they're on our farm,
right.
And we try to sell kids we aren't keeping as soon as possible. So we advertise them and have them leave the farm within 3 days because it's super expensive. The milk is so valuable.
They have to have goat.
Yes. Well, they have to have organic milk. We have at different times we had an organic dairy that was fairly close to us, so we'd go and buy cow milk for our replacements. We can do that, yes. And so we just find it easier than lugging all that milk around, and we find it just manage our milk supply so that we feed them our own. But we definitely try not to keep around animals that were, buck kids that we're giving away. You certainly try not to keep them around for a couple of weeks. So we're pretty organized about moving animals that we're not keeping off.
Right.
So everyone's there. Is all the kids that we raise are certified. Yeah.
So from
on the vegetable side.
So from my perspective, when I was originally certified, the government was not involved, and then 2002, the government. And the standards changed then. There was actually a pretty dramatic change in the standards, and it did force. It took some products I was using off, and that kind of pissed me off because I had spent hundreds of dollars on these products, and overnight I couldn't use them. And what do you do with these things? I mean, it's not like you have a secondary market you can sell a gallon of BTM to, So and there was only one particular product, and I understand why it's not certified because it's the bacteria for potato beetles, because the processor's never gone through to get the inert ingredients looked at to make sure it's all totally organic. But that was a great product because I could just spray it on potato beetles and it would just kill the larvae. Now the product I use is a much harsher product. It's organically certified, but it pretty much kills whatever it hits. It does kill the beetles, the larvae, who I want to get, but it's not a preferred product. So I understand why it's not a certified thing, but that's kind of frustrating that I lost use of that. But overall, when they changed the standards, there was a few things that I was doing that I was no longer allowed to do, which turned out to be, in the long run, I was totally at first I was like, "Arr!" And then you started doing them. It was like, oh, this actually is okay. So,
What might be an example of that?
well, it used to be that you might remember better, Greg. I think it was 30 days from the time, or 60 days. I can't remember which now. From the time you applied manure or compost before you could sell something. And they changed it to 90 days and 120. 120 days if it's a root crop, 90 days if it's above ground crop. And I personally, still to this day, think that's an absurd standard. VOF does not set that standard.
No.
They maybe helped in setting that standard to some degree, but they did not set that standard. I think it's absurd standard. But what I started doing is I would prep areas and get them ready to plant. And then plant to meet that, was it 60 days? I can't even remember, Greg.
It used to be 60.
The 60-day standard. Now I do everything right at the start of the year in April. Every single square inch I'm going to grow on all 10 acres by the end of April are tilled, fertilized, everything's ready to go. And then I just play this weed killing game until I planted them. Some of these areas I don't plant until the end of June. So for 2 months, every time the weeds come up and they go about that tall, I just put a cultivator on the tractor and race right through them. Only takes me a second. By the time I plant in these areas in June, I have no weeds. Zero. None. And life is beautiful. And that was great. And even if they change the standard, I'll never go back. I'll still do what I'm doing because battling weeds is my biggest preoccupation, and this really helped me. So that's an example right off the top of my head. So they still, now and then, they're a little better about it now. Sometimes they give you an advance warning that we're not going to certify this product again. Use it up. And they're better at that now because, now there's some of these products like this Entrust, it's $500 a pound. So I buy this stuff, a pound, I split it with another farmer. A half a pound of this stuff can last me 8 years. Mm-hmm. But if they decertify it the year after I bought it, I just spent $250. I got my half pound of spinosad, and somebody say, "Oh, you can't use it anymore." Right. I'm going to be pissed at somebody, because and so they're better at it now. They usually give you a warning and say, "Use it up. We're not going to like to use this product anymore," and that has been very helpful since they've started doing that.
And how about you?
Well, I can speak.
And the processing.
Yeah, and the processing. There are two experiences that I think that I've had on my farm, and none of them have been about a product that I was committed to using. It was more of a misunderstanding of what was allowed versus not allowed. So I remember last year, the inspector who came to my farm looked at the salt that we were putting in the pesto, and she said, "Are you sure that this doesn't have anti-caking agents in it?" And I had swear to God, I thought I had gotten the certificate from the company the year before, so I went back and I couldn't find it, and it kind of opened up this huge can of worms where I just realized that I didn't have the information I thought I had, and in the end, I don't disagree with the rule. I'm going to do everything I can to find the right ingredients for my pesto, so I'd be very pleased to hear that I found an organic kosher salt. It's actually certified by Omri. So it's just, sometimes it can be a little bit of a scavenger hunt, but it's I believe in the rule. I believe that the products that we're using have undergone some scrutiny, and I appreciate that scrutiny is happening. So I'm happy to go that way. The other thing to be careful of, though, is the other example was I bought a pallet of lime last year to put on our fields to alter the pH, and the salesperson that I talked to had told me that it was certifiable, and I'm really, really glad that the inspector caught it before I applied it to my fields, because I was able to return the pallet. Turns out it had a coating on it, on the pellets, that was not approved, and I called up the dealer, and the person I had talked to wasn't there, but his supervisor was a little bit ripped. But I was able to send the whole pallet back. If I had applied it, it would have been a problem for recertifying my fields. So there's some care and diligence to be taken, and a lot of things can happen just from misunderstandings. So,
just as a caveat to that, don't. I'm going to say this way, but don't trust any salespeople. They ultimately don't know the rules like Gregg and Laura do. So if you have a question, don't assume, because I've had many conversations where I'm buying a product from salespeople and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this. You guys don't know what you're talking about. And if you're buying a pesticide type of organic pesticide, it better have that OMRI label on it, OMRI, which stands for
Organic Materials Review Institute.
If it doesn't have it, it's not stamped OMRI. Your jug isn't stamped OMRI. Don't use it. So you got to be really careful about what you're doing, and that can come back and bite you. So you got to, if you're going to be organically certified, you do have to spend a little bit more time thinking about that whole process and thinking about where you're getting. You just can't run out and get stuff. You have to think about it. But when you get in the community, you can start asking people, and almost all the farmers I've ever dealt with are very friendly with each other, and they'll say, "Hey, where do you get that stuff from?" And say, "I get it from over here." You know, and everybody's pretty friendly about telling that there's really no secrets between us.
I have two questions. One is, do you find difficulty finding certain seeds that are organic? Or you have no issue, like that doesn't play at all?
They don't require that you buy all your seeds organically.
Oh, okay.
So if they did, I would not be organic. You need a reason why you're not buying an organic seed.
Maybe there's something that's not available.
I can't find that variety.
Okay.
Is the quality of the seed. We're having issues, and I guess Tim Sanford talked to you about the potato seed that we've been buying, and we're extremely unhappy with what we're finding that's organically seed, and so we're basically going to go through another guy who has a better genetic stock. And we're doing it not because we're trying to end run the high cost of organic seed. We're doing it because we're just unhappy with what we're getting. They do, and I don't exactly remember what the numbers are, but they do keep a percentage of what your percentage of organic seed is, and they would like to see that percentage rise.
I mean, even something like an onion start, that doesn't have to be.
No, the onion starts do. So seedlings do.
Okay, so
But-
there's a different.
Well, there's
no, not onion, like a, you know.
Well, planting stock
Yeah,
is
like
different than seedlings.
seed.
So planting stock has to be verified that it's untreated post-harvest. And
So-
we maintain a list
go through
of.
all the 30 pages.
I buy potato slips from a place down in Tennessee. They're untreated, but they are not organically grown. They're definitely conventionally grown, and that passes NOFA muster. And so there's a whole list of things I can't, and you don't have to be anal about it. They're very easy actually to work with. I look through like 3 different seed catalogs. If I can't find that seed that I want in those 3 catalogs, I just buy it I'll buy it conventionally out of one of those 3. I don't have to
Untreated.
look in. It has to be untreated. Yes,
And
yes.
non-GMO.
It has to be non-GMO and untreated. You can't. Those are sacred rules. So they're not anal about it, saying, "Hey, well, you know, we looked through 50 catalogs back in the office, and we actually did find that variety in one of those catalogs." They're not going to do that to you. If you demonstrate to them, look, I looked in the Fedco catalog, I looked in High Mowing, and I looked in Johnny's, and you know, those are the ones those are the ones I look in. I don't look into anything else. If I can't find it, you know, I'll just buy it conventionally out of one of those and be done.